joining us. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. We're gonna get started here just in a second. Just letting everybody else come in. Amazing. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. I want to introduce you all to, well, our host, but I will first introduce myself. I'm Allison. You may know my name from in the community. I am one of your community managers. We may also see Rachel's name a lot in our community. We are both in there all the time, but we're glad that you're here joining us today. And I want you all to meet Sonya. Sonya is amazing. She's a senior class specialist here at Teachstone, and she is going to answer all of your class questions. So if there's anything that you have questions about as we're meeting today, feel free to add them in the chat. You can always unmute and we can have conversations in real time. That's kind of the beauty of these small group conversations. But Sonya, do you want to share a little bit more about yourself?
So just like Allison said, I am a senior class specialist. I've been working for Teachstone for about 6 years already. And what I do is I coach, train administrators, teachers, professors all over the world. I am certified in the infant all the way to the 3rd grade class tool. And I have been in this field for over 30 years. I did start off my career as a pre-K teacher, and then I was an administrator for about 15 years as well. My first language when growing up, I spoke Spanish. I was the firstborn, so my parents only spoke to me in Spanish, and I learned English in school, and that's why I really value the educators. And I always wanted to be a teacher based on the educators that I had that motivated me and helped me and guided me and had the patience to teach me to speak English. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Sonya. That's so beautiful. Perfect. Well, we'll jump into one question. These are more back to school themed, but again, if you have any other questions that are not about back to school, that's totally fine. But yeah, so Sonya, the first question that came in was, what are some good strategies for building community in my classroom in the first few weeks of school?
So this is a great question, Allison. Some great strategies for building community in your classroom, especially, with this new school year coming, is maybe sending a memo to your parents, asking them what's the best way that they love to be in contact with you, whether it's an email, a text message, and then even introducing yourself, sending a letter or an email. We hardly ever do any letters anymore, but maybe sending email to the parents, introducing themselves, telling them a little bit about yourself, asking them questions about their child. What is it that their child likes, dislikes, what things are interesting for their child, what's maybe their favorite game or activity, and then getting a little history about who they are as, a family as well. And then maybe even asking the parents for a picture of their child, so then maybe you could create in your classroom a welcome board and already have the children's pictures there, so that when they walk in, they see, their pictures, so they start making that connection there with you. Those first few weeks, giving children responsibilities in the classroom, having them help you create classroom jobs, and even create the classroom rules together would be a great way to build a community with your children. Another thing would be display the children's artwork right away. So this way they see it, and they see it throughout the time that they're there. When they come in the next day, they'll be able to see that artwork being displayed. And then having those interactions with the children consistently throughout the day. The more you interact with them, the more you make those connections with them. Acknowledge all the positive things that the children are doing. Use lots of positive praise in the classroom, and that's another great way to build those relationships with your children. Another strategy that you could use is maybe during morning meeting, having the children work together with a partner. Maybe they could work on a puzzle together. So this way the children start building a relationship with one another. So you can maybe do that the first couple of weeks there in the program. So those are just a few of the strategies that you could, do there in your classroom to create that community within your classroom.
Thank you. I love that.
Mhm.
Awesome. Yep. Okay. We'll jump on to the next question. Again, if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to add them to the chat, or you can always unmute and you can share your questions aloud. So, um, perfect. The next question was, last school year was rough for me. What are some tips for staying focused and energized and avoiding burnout as the school year progresses?
This is another good question. And what I always tell teachers is have some flexibility. Maybe what worked last week may not work today. Maybe that activity that you had planned, the children aren't interested. That's okay to, modify that activity or tell them that you're going to do that activity a little later. Really having that flexibility is really important. Observing to see what the children are interested in, and based on what they're interested, modify that study that you have planned for that week or that month based on the children's interest. How can you incorporate that study or that subject based on what the children are interested in? And then sometimes, your large group time may not be the full 20 minutes. It may be only 5 minutes, and that's okay because the children are still learning in the various areas of the classroom and when you're interacting with them. Because sometimes we try to do so much and we want to do it all during large group or small group. But remember, you can modify it and the children will learn when you're interacting with them in the various areas of the classroom. So having some flexibility is really important.
I love that. Okay, awesome. The next question was, do you have any new ideas for classroom routines or procedures to improve efficiency?
Sure. So classroom routines are important. Those classroom routines help the children know what's going to happen. Creating that classroom routine with them is also important in the beginning of the school year, letting them know what's going to happen when they come in. What is it that's expected of them? Maybe when they walk into the classroom, they wash their hands. After they wash their hands, maybe they're going to sit down and do an activity. And maybe after that activity, they're going to have breakfast. But going over that classroom routine with them is really important. And if you ever have to change that classroom routine, let them know the why. Why can't they go outside today? Why can't they go to that large motor room? The children want to know why. Sometimes we don't give them the answer, but they're very smart, and they need to know why they can't go to that large motor room, or why they're not going to have library, or why you're changing the whole routine or that schedule for that day, because maybe there's a special field trip that day. And this way things run a lot more smoothly when children know what is expected of them throughout the day. Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
Awesome.
again, if anybody has any questions, please ask.
Yeah.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, and sometimes it's fun for these to turn more into just us talking to one another. So, of course, feel free to jump in and maybe if you want to share in the chat like what you do is what's your role in education, maybe that will help us as we're answering questions too, to like gear the questions to what you might find helpful. So, awesome. Okay. Well, the fourth question was, I struggle to stay organized. I always start out strong at the beginning of the school year, but then I fall behind. What are some ways to organize lesson planning to stay on track throughout the year?
So think about this when creating your lesson plans. You want to think about what is it that you want your children to gain? What is it that you want your children to learn? I know a lot of programs use studies in in their curriculum, and think about that study. Maybe sometimes that one study or that subject that you have for that week, maybe you could extend it to the following week based on the children's interest. Maybe you have a lot of children that are interested, in bugs and want to learn more about those insects. So extend that study maybe an extra week or two, based on what the children are interested and what's enticing them to be more engaged and wanting to know more about. So think about, extending some of those activities to the following week, or like I said, for 2 more weeks. And that will help you to stay, a little bit more on track instead of always trying to come up with new things. There's maybe specific books as well that are children's favorite, and maybe reading the book in a whole different way, asking them, how do you think I should read this book today? What ideas do you have? What ideas do you have of how we should create maybe the study, if that study is of insects? How should we create maybe a butterfly with various art materials that you have in the classroom? Instead of us always giving them the idea, have them use their own imagination, have them brainstorm and come up with those ideas.
Awesome. Love that. Thanks, Sonia. Perfect. Well, this is actually the last question that was submitted before our meeting today. So after this, we won't have any more, but we can talk about other things altogether. But yeah, keeping parents involved is hard these days. How do I plan to collaborate with parents and guardians to support student success?
So this is a great question because it is very difficult, I should say, to try to get parents involved these days, especially with so many, things going on and both parents working. But ask your parents, again, like we talked about earlier, what's the best way to communicate with them? Is it through a text message, an email, maybe creating a monthly newsletter just for your own classroom, letting the parents know what's happening, what type of activities is it that you're going to be doing in the classroom, what kind of activities or lessons can they reinforce at home, maybe even creating a parent board, and in that parent board acknowledge those parents or guardians that may be doing a little bit, extra. Acknowledge their efforts. Thank you to, Mr. or Miss, for reading maybe a book every night to their child. Parents love seeing maybe their picture on that bulletin board or just their name. Could also motivate other parents to want to, get a little bit more involved in the classroom. So little things like that, and having that, parent board somewhere right when they walk in, they'll be able to see it when they walk into your classroom, because they'll be able to see, either their name or their picture and how they're being acknowledged. And then, like I said, in that same parent board, put that monthly classroom newsletter. So this way the parents know what's happening and maybe what things you need from them, and
Mm.
giving them those expectations as well. And like I said, maybe sending them a quick little text message. Hey, how's it going? We're going to be doing this week. We would really appreciate your help in whatever it is that you need.
I love that. Thanks, Sonia. Awesome. And thank you. Miranda actually added a question here in the chat, so we can jump into that. So Miranda asked, do you have more unique ways for a teacher to expand on a study? I had a teacher ask me, how can someone walk into my room and know what study I'm doing? They do not want clutter, but they want to go deeper than the common books and puzzles related to the theme.
So remember, your studies don't always have to be at one specific time. Sometimes I hear that, like, that question of the day just being asked during large group time. And I ask the teachers, why don't you ask that question of the day when you're having breakfast with the children? Sometimes we just ask the children that question of the day during large group time, and after every child answers that question, there's nothing more going on. If we ask them maybe like during breakfast or when we're engaged with them in one of the centers, you could expand on the child's answer and get a lot more out of the child or the children when you're able to really have a nice, meaningful conversation, as opposed to having 20 children and you're asking them, that same question, and the children start giving you that same response. You'll get different responses from the children. So really, when you're thinking about that study and expanding on it, you can expand it on that in the various areas in your classroom when you're outside. And again, it could be like that study of insects. And maybe last month you were talking about insects, and this month you're talking about trees. How can you incorporate both of those studies? And remember last month we were studying insects. Today we're going to talk about the different, insects that live in trees. And we're going to go on a nature walk, and we're going to use our magnifying glass to look for the different types of insects that live in trees. And maybe they'll take like a little notebook with them, and a pencil so that they could draw or write the different insects that they found in the various types of trees on your walk.
Yeah. I think that's a great thought as well. Yeah. I remember one of our I think it was one of our teaching with class episodes. We were talking about something sort of similar where
Mhm.
we were talking about, like how can you keep reminding everyone like what the big topic is so that we can all be on the same page and we can all really dive into the subject. And of course there's ideas of like also adding it to like the board and making sure that it's like visible even if it's just in the corner. Like this week we're focusing on this thing and then if adults come in they can dive into that thing. Um but yeah, I think even just like if your students are old enough to read, even like I know for myself, having a constant reminder of like, oh yeah, that's the thing that like we're tying all together because it's not going to be in every moment of the day, but yeah, things like that too can be helpful.
Absolutely, Allison, because remember that study doesn't always just have to be during large group time.
Oh yeah.
On that. You could talk about that even during a meal. Your meal
Hmm.
time doesn't have to just be, let's talk about what is it that they're eating. It could be about your study. It could be about what you're gonna do in the afternoon. Like if they're, if it's during breakfast, you could talk to the children about that study and what's gonna happen and the type of things that you're gonna be doing. That's a great way, to get the kids motivated and excited about that study there. And then even relating those activities to their lives. Think about that. How often do we really do that? Do
Yeah.
they, even when we have children memorize, I always tell teachers is memorize those letters of their names, but do they really understand that the letters of their names make up other words, make up sounds?
Yeah.
So that's another way to entice the children, and they'll be more interested, especially when we have that flexibility there with them.
Yeah. Definitely. And thank you for a few of you who have shared your roles in the chat. So that we've got education manager at Head Start, Rhonda is here. Sarah is a class observer. Samantha's a former educator and now a class observer. So it's helpful to know what you all's roles are. And is there anything that you all are leaning into with your class journeys right now, or like, any way that we can support you?
How are you going to support your educators so that they do have more of those interactions, more conversations, asking children questions, having
Mm,
the children come up with their own ideas as opposed to, how we always come up with the ideas, but asking the children, to use their, imagination. How are you going to do that more of in your classrooms?
mm, yeah.
Don't be shy.
I think for me as an observer, it's really good to hear everybody's ideas because I get asked a lot when we do reflections and we prepare people for the observations on, how can I do this more or how can I do it better? Right. And so, I have a limited scope of my experience, but it's really cool to hear other ideas from other people on their different experiences. So this is helpful for me in that way. And now having experienced this, if you continue these monthly meetings, it would be great for other educators to be able to log in. And now I can say, I've been to it, highly recommend you go and you can ask questions kind of things too.
Mhm.
Totally. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really just an open space for us all to connect around anything related to class or any topics that our specialists might be able to help you all with. So, yeah, please feel free to invite anyone to join us. But yeah,
Yeah.
we'll keep doing these either monthly or bi-monthly. So,
And it
Yeah.
really is, I'm sorry, Allison, it's
Oh,
those
you're
interactions that are really important. Having our teachers self-reflect, how often am I interacting with the children? How long is it lasting? Sometimes we think, that we're having all these, I hear teachers all the time, I'm asking all those open-ended questions. I go, yeah, it's happening some, but is it happening consistently? What time of the day is it a little bit more challenging? What strategies can you put into place so those open-ended questions are happening throughout the day and not just a certain part of the day as well?
yeah.
Because that becomes
Frequency,
a
depth,
challenge.
and duration, right?
Yep, yep, absolutely. Especially see everybody with that second edition. There's even the definition there in that field guide, thinking about how often are those interactions happening and how long are they lasting in the
Mm,
classroom. And when they're lasting long and the teachers are asking, those great questions, often there's a great impact on the children's learning and development, especially when we're having those interactions, you're building those relationships with the children.
yeah.
Keeping them involved also helps, with that behavior in the classroom. Sometimes behavior issues happen in the classroom because children aren't sure what they should be doing or not sure what those expectations are.
Yeah. I saw that Miranda added in the chat that she's getting used to class second edition. So now looking at every child versus the average experience of the child in the classroom.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's definitely a transition.
Yep. I love the second edition. I love how we have the definitions for each of our indicators so that when you're coaching your educators, you could provide those definitions for them. Because a lot of times there's educators that really don't understand what those indicators are all about. We have in the back of the book in your field guide, even those class terms are and the definitions are listed there as well. You could even provide those examples to your educators of what that indicator looks like, what those examples of those behavioral markers are all about. And I love how you have the descriptive pages are based on each of those indicators as well. So that's another great way for you to even work or coach your teachers so that those interactions are happening more often.
Mm, yeah. I saw too that Jocelyn shared, she does coaching QRIS, and she asked, how can continue to support more with concept development with educators who have like newly 3-year-olds, those
Yeah, that's
young 3-year-olds.
that is a good question because I do have a lot of teachers. Well, Sonia, I'm asking those, how and why questions, those problem solving questions, but they don't say anything verbally. But I go, but they respond back to you through their actions, pointing
Mm,
to something, maybe they're continuing with that activity. That's another way that they're communicating with you, even their facial expression. Describe to them what you're doing, describe to them what they're doing. That's still language there for them. So they are able to really communicate with you. It's just us really stepping back and being observant of that because
mm,
sometimes we respond right away and we don't allow that child that opportunity to process it or to respond back through their actions.
mm,
So that is a great question. Yeah. And then with concept development, remember creativity or creating as the children are generating their own products or ideas. How often do we allow them to create their own products or ideas? An example, like during large group time, a lot of times we tell the children, okay, I'm going to take attendance. And when you hear your name, say here. Whose idea is it for them to say here? The educators. For it to fall under creativity or creating is telling the children, rephrasing that question and asking them, I need to take attendance. How should I take attendance today? We never know how they're going to respond. Maybe they're going to say, let's jump up or let's sing when you call our name. I don't know. And then think about how often with the integration, how often do we connect those concepts to past concepts? Do we
mm,
do it sometimes? Do we only do it once? How often do we really make those connections, even those connections to the real world? How often do we connect those concepts to the children's lives, whether it's inside the classroom or outside the classroom? We could do that, especially with our 3-year-olds. Do you have any trees by your house? Have you ever seen any insects? Remember yesterday I was reading, I don't know, maybe a story about insects. Today I'm going to read a different story about maybe butterflies. And that's another, type of insect. So it is possible with our 3-year-olds because they are listening to everything. They're absorbing everything that you're saying. And we're modeling all that as we're talking to them through our actions. Just that some are a little bit more vocal right away and others are not, but they're communicating again through those nonverbal actions. It's just us stepping back and really being observant of that. Anybody else have another question?
The big topic, concept development always, and behavior management. I feel like those are the two big ones.
It is, and that's why that consistency, even with those behavior expectations, and that's everyone in the classroom is providing those expectations consistently in the classroom. Sometimes we give up right away, and remember, we cannot get rid of the behavior, but we're guiding our children so that they could manage their behaviors, maybe even having the classroom rules in every area of the classroom as opposed to just one area of the classroom. Because sometimes when they're having a little situation, or I heard somebody say we have some children that are sparklers in the classroom. Sometimes when there's an episode going on, they don't want to go to that one area to look, at the classroom rules. When we have it in every area, it's easily just to refocus that child so that they can look wherever they're at that classroom rules, or maybe even having the classroom rules in index cards. Usually you only have 3, 4, 5, maybe, I think has been the most classroom rules that I've seen. So you have your classroom rules and little index cards. So this way you and your co-teacher can carry those classroom rules. So when you're redirecting that behavior, you have those rules with you, not only there in the classroom, but outside the classroom when you're going for a walk would be another great strategy to pull out those classroom rules.
Yeah, I've seen some centers that have the rules posted around the whole school, like in the hallway. And then the whole school has the same rules, which is nice for when children transition. But like when they're lining up outside, the rules are there too, with visuals, pictures for the kids to understand as well.
Perfect. Really important, Sarah. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, pictures. Have pictures of the children that are currently in your classroom too. Children that are there at your center, and not those little cartoon figures, because when you have pictures of your students, it becomes more meaningful for them. And even sharing those classroom rules with your parents is another great way to collaborate. Maybe having your parents work on one of the rules each week. Would be a great way to have your parents work with you as well to reinforce those expectations. Anybody else have a question?
I do love that idea, Sarah, that school has the same rules throughout the entire, across the age levels, and then the students know that the expectation doesn't change even though their classroom does. So that's really cool.
Okay. Anybody else? Question or comment, or maybe a strategy that you use?
Yeah, it looks like we just got a question from Emma. Emma said, with quality of feedback, does the child need to initiate the conversation for feedback loops, or can teachers start off the conversation?
Remember, quality of feedback is in response to what the child is doing or what they said or a comment. So based on what they're doing, you could ask them a question to get that whole conversation started. So that would be a great way. And then you engage them, in a back and forth exchange.
Okay, so that you can ask them the question, but as long as it's pertaining to what the child's doing, or Interesting.
Remember,
Okay.
yeah, remember quality of feedback is in response to what the child is doing, a comment that they said, or something that they told you. So based on, again, what you see them doing. Oh, I see that you're making blah, blah, blah. Why are you making? And based on what the child responds, you could build on that.
Okay. Nice. And then you make your own feedback loop.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because
Nice.
you never know what the child's gonna tell you, what they're making, and based on that, he may be telling you he's making an aquarium because he may have said all my frogs have to be green. And we know that not all frogs are green. The frogs could be of other colors. So then, you build on that into a conversation, and until the child has the understanding that there could be frogs of other colors other than just green. And maybe that some frogs, and I don't know too much about frogs, but that some frogs don't have to live in the water. Maybe some do, I don't know, but just build on what the child has said. And usually stop that conversation or that feedback loop when the child has that right understanding.
Hmm. Makes sense.
Mhm.
Awesome. Does anyone else have anything that they're struggling with as we go into a new school year, or anything that comes to mind with helping with coaching or with observations this year, or even just questions about second edition now that you're transitioning, or anything like that? It's not always easy. We know that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sonia, I know one topic that has come up a lot,
Mhm.
just emails that I've seen lately, is just like learning loss over the summer, and how so many students come in with just like they were at a similar level at the end of the year, and they come back and it's just kind of all over the place all over again. Do you have any tips of how you would deal with that as like an educator? Like how do you assess where everybody is at the beginning of the year and help them all to get the correct support to get back on track?
So that's a great question. Sometimes we get frustrated because we see that children come back from being on vacation, and you're back at square one. It really is being patient, meeting where the child's at. And remember, every child is different. They all learn differently. And that's why modifying those activities based on the individual needs of the students is very important. Being observant of your children, knowing their abilities and how you could meet them halfway through so that they don't feel defeated. And again, using those positive comments in the classroom more often. I'm so proud that you're, back on track. I know in the beginning we were having a difficult time, maybe with one of the classroom rules, and now you're using your walking feet. Because when we acknowledge the positive things that they're doing, it's going to motivate the children.
Wow.
And also asking the parents for their feedback, asking them to support you as well, or what is it that they need from you so that their child can get back to refocus on the activities that you had been teaching before they maybe were out for the summer, or maybe they were off for a couple of weeks or a week, maybe they went on vacation. And that's why I suggested sharing even like those classroom rules with the parents, having that monthly calendar, or like, yeah, monthly calendar newsletter, letting the parents know the different types of activities, lessons that you're doing there in your classroom, so that they could, also reinforce those type of activities at home, maybe even in that newsletter. You could give parents tips of the type of things that they could do at home with the various materials that they have there in their home, where they don't have to go and buy any materials, because they could use pots and spoons to make music in the classroom. They could help the parent do laundry. They could sort the clothing based on color, texture. They could count how many socks they're folding together. So there's a lot of things that they could just do at home with the various materials, things that you have there in your household.
Yeah, I love that. I've also heard so many educators get creative around like crafts, and they can tell all their parents like, okay, save your milk jugs for the next couple months or whatever it may be, and then they make some big class project, which it's always so fun to hear about.
Yeah, have conversations with them. Put those, technology down, those, tablets, iPhones, have conversations with them during mealtime. Ask them about what they did when they were maybe at a summer camp program, what they did at school, what is it that they're excited about, what did they learn, why was that their favorite, I don't know, study or thing to learn about.
Yeah.
Ask them, open-ended questions. Give those suggestions to the families of how they could have conversations at home with their children, because sometimes they're not sure how. So even giving them examples of the type of questions that they could ask their children.
Yeah. Love that. Well, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to unmute or add in the chat, or even just if you want to ask other people on this call questions. There's so many people from different backgrounds with totally different perspectives. So if there's anything that you want to share, feel free. If not, it's okay. We can end a little early, but let's give everyone a chance to speak up if you'd like. I'll at least change this slide for now. But I want to say thank you for all of you for joining us today. It is always nice to hear from all of you and have this time to connect. We have the community online, but it's different when we get to have more casual conversations together. So we will add this recording to the community, and Rachel will create a little resource based on some of the tips shared today. And a huge thank you to Sonya for joining us and for giving us your expertise today. We could not do stuff like this without your expertise. So thank you.
I loved it.
But yes, and if of course you can always find us in the community@teachstone.com. You can reach out to me there, or Rachel or Sonya. We're all there. So thank you again. And if you do have any questions after this that you're like, gosh, I should have asked, ask us in the community. Start a discussion there. So thank you all again.
Thank you, everybody. Happy Monday.
Yeah, happy Monday.